We need to build a philosophy community. Podcasts are amazing. There's so much that's negative about social media, the way it embeds and amplifies polarization, social division. But podcasts, the way people are enthusiastic about watching these long-form discussions of deep ideas that previously you would have had to go to university to learn about. It's absolutely amazing. Just what I'm finding talking to more and more people is that they're finding it incredibly passive, right? You're just passively watching this discussion of these high-profile thinkers. Maybe you can comment, but your comment's lost, buried in hundreds of other comments. More and more live events coming up, which are amazing, but again, you're just sort of passively watching. Maybe you'll get a chance to ask a question in the Q&A. I just think more and more I'm hearing people think they're not heard. They're not involved. They don't have a voice. I'm starting to think maybe the next evolutionary step in the space of online ideas is to somehow form something more interactive, more community-based. How do we do that? I don't know. One idea I've had is, could there be somehow mass Zoom calls with breakout rooms, right? So you find yourself in a small room with a group of people, maybe to discuss what you've all just been watching or listening to, a little bit like a university seminar. Could there be tech that assigns you to a breakout room based on geography? So you end up with, oh my gosh, it's my neighbor. I'm talking to my neighbor from across the road. Maybe you can go for a coffee, a drink. Some kind of way of moving from something passive to something that's really building a community of ideas. I don't know. I'm trying to think more about this. I suppose I'm just starting a conversation. What am I doing in my own case? Very little, I suppose, just trying to connect things up. I finally started a YouTube channel. I didn't want to. The way my brain works, my neurodiversity, I just wanted one thing. I was just on Substack. I was enjoying that. Just wanted to do that. Then there's kind of more and more people whinging, I want to watch videos on YouTube. Anyway, I've given in. I've set up a YouTube channel. But what I'm trying to do is sort of keep them closely connected. So one way in which I'm doing that is having subscriber questions from the Substack, which I'm going to get to in a moment, and then doing the video answering those questions on the YouTube channel. Also, what I'm trying to do is connect up different philosophy channels and podcasts. I'm going to do a few YouTube interviews this month, I'll tell you about presently, but some of them I'm going to do as collaborations, right? My recent chat with Alex O'Connor was a collaboration on his channel as well. A few others I'll tell you about. Just trying to sort of connect things up a bit, not just be these individual people and then everyone else is passively listening, connecting things up, somehow bringing in interacting with the audience a bit more. I don't know. Maybe as this grows, what I'm doing here, maybe I get more paid subscribers. Maybe there's ways of setting up live events that have more interaction somehow. I don't know. Maybe do little discussion bits or something in small group discussion. I don't know. For those who are supporting me financially, either paid subscribers on Substack or the Patreon on YouTube, thank you very much. Just to say that money is all going just to supporting my public work at the moment, paying someone to edit the videos, because having a very demanding job and young kids, I just couldn't do this otherwise. But maybe if it grows, maybe that money could be used for some kind of events, mass Zoom calls, who knows, get someone to do the tech, I don't know. It's all a dream at the moment, but just to say that money isn't going for me to go on holiday or whatever. All right, so I'm going to get to subscriber questions. Let me know what you think of that next evolutionary step in the space of online ideas. I'm just starting to think about this. I'd be interested to know what people think. So I'm going to get to subscriber questions, but just to update you where I'm up to. So my Why book comes out in paperback next week, 12th of March. Is that next week? There's the hardback behind my shoulder. You can pre-order now. Please do. So I'm going to put up a discussion with Philip Pullman about the book next week to mark the publication date of the 12th of March. What else is going on? I think I've said before, May the 1st, I'm having a discussion with William Lane Craig, Jessica Fraser, Joseph Foley in the Royal Institution Theatre in London. Tickets available for that now. Other than that, in terms of online stuff, so I'm doing a few YouTube interviews that are quite exciting this month of March. I'm going to go on Phil Halper's, Skydive Phil's channel, to discuss the inverse gambler's objection to multiverse explanations of fine-tuning. So I've been working with this on this with Kenny Boyce and Mark O'Brien, who's sort of on the other side of the discussion. Really interesting stuff emerging from this. It's mainly those two, to be honest. I feel honoured to be even part of this discussion, which is probably, I think, going to become a paper. The challenges from Mark and the mathematical framework Kenny's been developing. I don't know. I feel like sort of cutting edge of knowledge. It's very exciting. And, it's a crucial fundamental question. If you think fine-tuning needs explaining, if me and Kenny are right that you can't do it with a multiverse, you're stuck with something goddish. But anyway, you can tune into the debate on Phil Halper's channel. So that's the Atheist channel. Then I'm also going to go on the Analytic Christian, a very good Christian philosophy channel, with Nevin Klemenhager. I'm going to be having a little bit of debate about God of limited powers. Nevin is an unbelievably good philosopher. If you've seen my YouTube debate with William Lane Craig, we had a little bit of back and forth about Molinism, and I was appealing to Nevin's very good co-written paper, raising some deep challenges, some rather technical challenges for Molinism. Nevin's also got a really interesting, I really sign up to his slightly unorthodox way of thinking about what's going on in Bayesian calculations, that it's not really about updating on new evidence the way we tend to think about it. It's about identifying relations of rational support, evidential support between propositions. This is actually the view the great economist Keynes had, which Nevin is sort of rediscovering and laying out in very rigorous ways. And me and Kenny Boyce both sign up to that. I think it has some real advantages for thinking about the old evidence problem, if you've come across that in Bayesian reasoning. Okay, so we're going to have a little theological debate. In the middle, I'm going on a Miles Donohue's channel. Brilliant channel. Check it out if you can. I think we're going to be delving a bit into the heretical Christianity, some of the issues that didn't come up on the my recent discussion on Alex O'Connor's channel. So apart from that, my day-to-day activity basically is trying to finish this bloody book, Heresy, how panpsychism offers a unique way of bringing together the scientific and the spiritual. I think actually just today I've got a complete, very rough draft. My deadline's the end of March. I really like the way this book has evolved. I'm quite excited. So probably about a year before it comes out, but it's very exciting. So what's been going on this channel and Substack? So I had an interview with Alex O'Connor where I tried to press him on... So he has a sort of a strong realism about consciousness, which I agree with, but a kind of strong anti-realism about value, which I disagree with. And I was trying to identify tension here. I think I might have some interesting publishable ideas here. So anyway, just starting to think about that. And what was my article? Can science ever explain consciousness? Why I don't think physical science alone can deal with consciousness, although it's a very crucial part of it. We need science and philosophy kind of working together. Fantastic reaction to that. Really, really good comments, a really good discussion. Maybe we'll have some questions on that today. Coming up this month, we'll have my interview with Anil Seth, which was my first in-person interview. That was an absolutely wonderful conversation. I'm looking forward to that going up. And then I'll write something maybe about... I think people don't explore. It's a really underappreciated issue. Why did consciousness evolve? I think there are deep mysteries, not about the hard problem, the kind of issues I wrestle with normally, physicalism, dualism, panpsychism. Actually, separate from that, partially separate at least, I think there are deep mysteries about why consciousness evolved that people skate over. Right. I think that's pretty much my update. So I'll just spend the rest of this video answering some subscriber questions. I've identified 10 questions, a lot more and more questions each month, so I'm, just trying to pull out some of them. Paid subscribers get priority, but any subscribers on Substack can ask these questions. Okay, let's go for it. So Atheist Christian Firebrand asks, any plans for a children's book or some similar thing so that your ideas can be shared with audiences who don't have the ability to follow your books? That's a great question, actually. I do have a little bit in mind, a sort of very liberal, progressive version of the Jesus story for children. I was trying to persuade my wife, who's not religious, but she illustrates, my wife Emma illustrates my books, if she'd want to do that, but I think she's not that on board with all the Jesus stuff. So I don't know. I'm really interested in connecting. I went into my kids' school actually in Interfaith Week, the 9-year-olds or 10-year-olds, and they are bloody natural philosophers. They're just straight on. It's the big questions. It's the big questions. And they were. I think the teacher gave me a bit of a nervous look when I said, "Look, there's these different religions. What are the different religions?" It's like, how do we know which one is true? And the teacher sort of looked very nervously. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I'd love to connect more to kids' philosophy. Let me know if you've got thoughts or resources for doing that. I do a lot of school talks, by the way, and related things. Okay, Jacob asks, one consideration that makes it seem like science will never explain consciousness is that it seems from introspection that the entire essence of a phenomenal state like painfulness is the way it feels. I think this is the longest question I'm going to do. This assumption seems like it can do a lot of work, for example, by showing that the essence of painfulness cannot also instead be the activity of C fibers, like a brain state or functional Turing machine analysis. Do you think this assumption is warranted? And do you think anything at all could justify rejecting it? Okay, so getting to the core of it, the debate over physicalism. I guess this is connected to my post on can you ever give? I was rejecting the idea that you could ever give a physical science explanation of consciousness. I just don't think it makes sense. It's not just, we haven't done it yet. The very idea doesn't make sense. You can read my post. So Jacob here is saying, is that because you're identifying consciousness with what it's like, how it feels? So maybe if we reject that, maybe we could give a physical science explanation. Firstly, I let me side a little bit more with physicalists in a way. I don't think Jacob's right that settles it. The vast majority of physicalists, I mean, look, let me put it this way. I think there are two approaches a physicalist can take to this. The majority position, people like David Papineau, Janet Levin, Esed de Asleon, by far the majority position is to say, we agree with that definition of consciousness. How pain feels, what it's like to see red. Yeah, man, we're on board. We believe in qualia. Yeah, we're up for that. We dig it. But it's just identical with patterns of neural firings. Just like water is identical with H2O. That's it. It's just a brute identity. And often they say, there's no hard problem to solve. It's just a normal scientific identity. That's it. The other approach you can take, the more minority but still respectable approach, people like Keith Frankish, Mark O'Brien, who I'm working on the fine-tuning stuff with. He's on the other side of the debate. Daniel Dennett, the late, great Daniel Dennett, is to say, well, not to say that pain is, not necessarily to say pain, it's not about how things feel or what it's like, but there's a sort of illusion in the way many philosophers take that to think it necessarily requires more than just what stuff does, more than just structure and dynamics and behavioral functioning. So I think it's evident, like, when you attend to how pain feels. When I think about, I'm thinking, my friend Bob is feeling pain. That is not a behavioral claim. It's not a claim about how Bob's behaving or how Bob's inner parts are behaving, right? It's just a claim about how Bob feels, and it's a very different kind of claim. But illusionists will deny that. They say, no, that's a kind of illusion. It is. Ultimately, Keith is always keen to say, it's not that I don't believe in consciousness, but ultimately, when he believes in consciousness, on feelings and experiences, it is something that's just purely behavioral. I need to add that it's not just external behavior. It's, the behavior of the bits inside your brain, or about how it all connects up, the complex causal network. But it's just about what stuff does. Right? It's purely a claim about what stuff does, structure and dynamics. I think that's just not what I mean. That is just not what I mean when I talk about feelings. It's not a claim about what stuff does. Not saying it's no. Here's the nuance. It's not saying it's nothing to do with what stuff does. Obviously, when you feel pain, you scream and run away. But it's not purely a claim about what stuff does. But Keith will say that's a sort of illusion. Okay, so there's two ways you can do it. I guess Jacob is assuming it's the more illusion is the option, but actually the mainstream physicalist position is to say no. We accept your definition, man. We're all friends. So, I'm not trying to ridicule them. Some of my close friends are physicalists, but nonetheless, it's just a brood identity. So, like someone like I think me and Keith and Dennett might have. In a sense, there's a deep agreement because we think that doesn't make sense, right? This moderate, hey, kumbaya, we're all friends position, that doesn't really make coherent sense. Either you say, no, there's an illusion. Really, when we talk about consciousness, it's just what stuff does, behavior. Or you say, so that's one extreme, the illusionist extreme, or I'm at the other extreme saying, no, it's more than just behavior. And so because of that, the idea of a physical science explanation just doesn't make sense, because physical science explanations are all about explaining what stuff does in a very broad sense of that phrase. It's all about structure dynamics, what stuff does, explaining the phase change of water, how it behaves. That's what it's all about. So in a way, both Dennett on one side and me on the other are have an allegiance in objecting to that middle way position. It's often like this. You've got these triangles in a lot of philosophical discussions. Free will, One extreme, the libertarian who says, they believe in very strong free will. Other extreme, the hard determinist who says there's no such thing as free will. And then there's the moderate, we all love each other. There is free will, but it's just compatible with determinism, man. And in a sense, the extremes have that allegiance because they're like, no, my friend, that doesn't make sense. Same with value, Okay. Right. Obviously, there's huge discussions here, but I guess I think people know what I think. Benjamin J. Curtis, you recently made a note saying that your Christianity has just gone more heretical. Are you going to spill the tea? Let's have some tea. I'm just increasingly feeling torn between the religions of the East and the religions of the West. On the one hand, I take very seriously a certain kind of mystical experience, a kind of experience we find in many different cultures, where the person having the experience has a deep sense of being one with ultimate reality. And I take these seriously not just as psychological episodes, but as genuine insights into the ultimate nature of reality. Now, if I was just motivated by that, I'd probably end up as a proponent of Advaita Vedanta, this school of Hindu mysticism, where the only thing that is real is ultimate reality, what they call Brahman. And the thing I refer to with the I pronoun just is Brahman. The thing you refer to with the I pronoun just is Brahman. The deep self that they call Atman is Brahman. I'd probably end up there. But I'm also motivated by certain traditional arguments for the existence of God, arguments rooted in the need to explain why the universe exists, why there's something rather than nothing. Arguments based in the fine-tuning of physics for life that claim this points to some kind of purpose or goal-directedness in the early universe. So I'm just torn in these two directions, and I'm increasingly thinking, I want both. Why can't I just say these are two aspects of the divine? There's the aspect of the divine that the Hindus get right, the aspect of the divine that is my deep self. But there's also an aspect of the divine that is distinct from me, that is the unknowable ultimate source of everything that is and was and will be. I want it all. So it's increasingly my faith is kind of mix and match. And I feel sort of unapologetic about that. You know, why the fuck should I believe what the Nicene guys dreamt up 300 years after Christ died? You know, if you want a church where everyone has to believe what the Nicene guys thought, even though you're not even Catholic, or everyone has to believe John Calvin's theory of penal substitution, even though it wasn't part of Christianity for the first 1500 years, or everyone has to think gay sex is sinful just, because, there are many churches like that. Knock yourself out. But know that there are also churches that are more flexible, right? I think matters are just inherently uncertain in this area. So I'm going to do my mix and match. I'm going to have my best guess as to what's going on. And I'm going to engage with that to deepen myself spiritually, to connect to a community, to find meaning and purpose. And it's going wonderfully. I had a tweet that went quite viral recently where I was just talking about how my 25 minutes of meditation every morning that I've been doing for a few years now is just really starting to deepen me. I'm really feeling a connection with a source of joy and peace and creativity at the core of my being. At least that's what it feels like anyway. So yeah, it's really deepening me spiritually. So screw you, evangelical Christian who says I'm not a Christian. Go and find someone else to get your insecurities out on. Anyway, next question. Oh yeah, more on that. I recently had a discussion on the Panpsycast podcast with Miri Al-Bahari and David Goodwin, two preeminent proponents of Advaita Vedanta. I think it's one of the best podcast discussions I've ever done, actually. Or on my Substack, check out my article, Why I'm Not a Buddhist. It goes into this in a bit more detail. Okay. Jacopo Palagrossi asks, do you believe there is knowledge by acquaintance, meaning sui generis, non-propositional knowledge constituted by direct awareness of things? If so, what do you take its objects to be? Yeah, well, I guess I think our awareness of our own experiences is like that. When I attend to how my pain feels, what it's like to see red, the qualitative character of the experience. It's famously kind of ineffable. As Louis Armstrong said about jazz, if you have to ask, you'll never know. You can't really grasp what it's like to see red until you have a red experience. But I think that's the sort of knowledge by acquaintance. Millen Thomas Freed. Who are the most annoying apologists in your opinion? My number one favourite is Ali Beth Stuckey, with Ken Ham just below her. I also dislike Frank Turek and Alyssa Childers. I haven't had much experience in Ken Ham. Is he sort of young Earth creationist or something? The other three, I mean, they're just so ignorant of history, aren't they? They all think penal substitution, this idea that Jesus was punished for our sins, is just and always has been the essence of Christianity. No historian thinks that, right? There's some debate about whether it was a peripheral idea before the Protestant Reformation 500 years ago. I mean, I don't think it was there at all. I think that my sense is that's more the majority opinion. But it certainly wasn't the core of the faith, you know. And it's just so polarized, aren't they? They're not interested in engaging people. I'm really happy I'm engaging with William Lane Craig, and we can try, and part of what we want to do is have a discussion that tries to understand how people who've disagreed very deeply can live together in the same society. I don't live with William Lane Craig. Live in the same society. You know, I guess he thinks people like me who are pro-choice, you know, we're bloody murdering babies. I think people like him who are, you know, think gay sex is sinful are causing great harm to misery to many young people throughout the country. So we both think each other has very harmful, manifestly false views. What do? You just shout at each other, or do you just try and find a way forward? But these three, you know, Stuckey, Turek and Childers, they're not interested in that. They are completely closed-minded ideologues and just straightforwardly ignorant by any... I mean, it's just not even controversial, the penal substitution issue. Okay, Chase asks, would there also be a favourite and or most helpful heretical Christian apologist? People I love Randall Rousers, doing a lot of great videos. He does so many videos. I want to watch them all, but there's a lot of them. Coming out of an evangelical background, I think he still thinks himself as an evangelical, but the intense ethical nightmare that is arising from the MAGA movement, engaging with that, I think he's got fascinating, really interesting stuff to do on genocide in the Bible, and being a Christian that's gay affirming. Fascinating stuff. I've said a lot, Dale Allison, the biblical scholar, is a big influence on me. I love that Dale is sort of naturally has a liberal disposition, but ends up with more conservative views just because he thinks that's where the evidence drags him. You know, he's open to John, son of Zebedee, being a big direct influence on John's gospel, and, you know, very conservative position, empty tomb. So I love that real open-mindedness. He really engages with both sides. Fantastic. Who else was I gonna say? Oh God, my mind's going blank now. There are so many figures here. I'll have a think and put some more up. Discourse says, why do you have so I had 5% credence in illusionism? How can you entertain the idea that qualia does not exist? Well, I wouldn't portray... It depends what you mean by qualia. So, as Keith is always keen to point out, it's not necessarily saying consciousness doesn't exist. It is... I think, Keith, correct me if I'm still getting this wrong, but I think of the view as consciousness exists, feelings exist, but it's nothing more than what stuff does. When we say if we're thinking correctly and we say someone's feeling pain, that's purely a claim about what stuff does. Not just external behavior, but bits inside the brain and body as well. But it's just a claim about what stuff does. And it's an illusion to think, no, consciousness, feelings, experiences are something more than just what stuff does. So I guess I'm subject to that illusion on this view. So, you know, I don't take it very seriously. I think, do I say even 5%? Because, you know, I always come back to this. I think in philosophy, in trying to find out the ultimate nature of reality, you just got to start what seems most evident. And that feeling pain, to feel pain is not just about behavior in this broad sense. That seems to me more evident. You know, it's just a claim about what I mean, what I understand. I suppose it's not just what I understand, but the understanding that is most fundamental and that is correct and that is, I have some certainty of. You know, our beliefs about our consciousness, or some of them at least, like I'm feeling pain now, are very close to certain, right? And I think the way I conceive of that, in that certain knowledge, relative to that, it's self-evidently more than just what stuff does. So I feel very confident about it. You know, it's almost like 2 + 2 is 4 or something. Maybe not that. But you know, maybe it's some kind of wild illusion. In my Why book, pre-order now, I give an analogy to 1984, when he's kind of brainwashed to think, you know, 2 + 2 is 5. You know, maybe evolution's just brainwashed me to think this. But I'd need very strong evidence, and I never see what the evidence is supposed to be. That's the problem. Okay. Question 8. Konrad Kołodziejczyk. Mówię troszeczkę po polski. In your exchange with Massimo Pigliucci, where he invokes, it's another long one, where he invokes the analogy between consciousness and vitalism, I was struck by the fact that you didn't address David Sharma's objection to that very analogy. In The Conscious Mind, Chapter 3, Section 2, under the subsection Objection 2, could a vitalist have said the same thing about life? Chalmers argues that the analogy fails because life is ultimately definable in terms of structure and dynamics, whereas consciousness is not. Since Pigliucci drew the analogy of vitalism in that exchange, I'm curious why you didn't engage with Chalmers' response to it. That is going back a long time now, my interactions with Massimo, so I just can't remember. I'd have to look back at it. I mean, I do very much agree with Chalmers on this, and it's just coming back to what we've been talking about. I think it's self-evident that when we talk about feelings and experiences, in terms of just what we mean, it's not just what stuff does. Whereas when we talk about life, unless we're talking about consciousness as part of life, we are just talking about what stuff does. That's the kind of stuff physical science is good at explaining. You know, complex behavior, the behavior of a living system. I guess maybe with this discussion with Pigliucci, I also connected to the fact that physical science kicks off with Galileo taking consciousness out of the story. You know, that's what I talk about in Galileo's Error. So maybe I focused on that. I don't know. It must have just been, I thought another objection was more salient. Thanks, Conrad. I think you're on the other side of these discussions to me, aren't you? Maybe a sort of illusionist or physicalist at least. I've enjoyed our interactions. Clashman says, for someone who's in the qualia realist plus value anti-realist camp, ditching the value anti-realism does nothing to address psychophysical harmony on its own. It's only the first step needed to accept the second step solution of panagentialism, and that second step is doing all the work. As someone in that camp, I'd want to take panagentialism, modify it to fit in a value anti-realist worldview. For example, there's I desire thisness built into phenomenology, and we respond directly to our internal desires, no robust value needed. Skip the step of converting to value realism. And what do you think of this? So panagentialism is the sort of the view I defend in my Why book, talked about a little bit in my chat with Alex on this channel, that free will goes all the way down in some very primitive sense. Well, I don't know. I don't know how you get the problem off the ground without value realism. What is messed up about inverted Ian unless you're a value realist? So maybe I just need to hear more, Clashman, about I don't see how you get the problem off the ground. I don't see what there is to be explained. And what I think needs to be explained is how come the way consciousness and behavior are lined up in general respects relations of rational appropriateness. Like pain is appropriate, pain behavior, avoidance behavior is appropriate to pain. Seeking behavior is appropriate to pleasure. Why? But if they are conceptually separable, as I believe them to be, consciousness and behavior, why are they matched up, the consciousness and the behavior, in this rationally appropriate way? If you're not going for relations of objective rational appropriateness, I don't know how you get the problem off the ground. Okay. Oh, I got a few minutes. My wife's going to kill me. Not that she is the kind of person who's kill me, but I'm just panicking. DAF says, what evidence would convince you that the feel of an experience is nothing over and above the network of relations it participates in, its causal role, its functional profile, its representational links, its behavioral consequences? Okay, this seems to be the theme today. Brilliant. I'm really happy that maybe it's the article, the Substack article, engaging with what I think is the core of the issue. I don't know. I don't think it's an evidential... Well, look, I mean, it seems to me self-evident. And it might sound, although it's not a good reason, but I just think you've got to start with what seems self-evident, or what seems most evident. We don't know, we're not in the Matrix, you know? You just got to start with what seems most evident. What would convince me? I mean, maybe, I guess I'm more and more convinced of a sort of, that my view of consciousness leads to a sort of strong emergentism about consciousness. So that consciousness makes a causal difference. This might be what a Substack article I write this month, about why did consciousness evolve. So maybe if we really did have evidence for something like what Sean Carroll thinks, that everything is reducible to basic equations of physics, that there are no fundamental causal principles that kick in at higher levels of complexity, something I'm going to be talking about a lot, writing about on my Substack, that might give me pause for thought, because I'm increasing. So at some point I'll interview Luke Roloffs, who's perhaps the most influential, very reductionist panpsychist. So he would disagree with me on this. He'd say, no, we can have a very reductive panpsychist story. I'm increasingly thinking, I'm always, yeah, that's not a middle way option there. So maybe if I was convinced by Sean, that there was a very reductionist story, maybe that made me think again. It's very difficult. You're always just weighing it. It's not just evidence. It's not just what seems most evident, or philosophical reflections or arguments. It's the whole mix, isn't it? And you balance it up. Okay, final question, Neil Davies. My question is on Mary's room, which also came up in the Alex O'Connor interview. I'm thinking the only thing Mary can know when she leaves the room from her experience alone is that she is having a novel experience. Everything else requires context from empirical data. So does that make sense? Do you agree? And does it affect the conclusion of the thought experiment? I'm fairly sure that your answer will be ... Nice way of ending. No, I think, look, I think she does know something more. She knows what it's like to have the experience, the phenomenal character, the qualitative character of the experience. You can't convey that, what it's like, to someone who hasn't had the experience. You have to sort of directly apprehend it, but I nonetheless think there's substantive information there. I was debating on Substack with Lance Bush, who thinks, oh no, you're kind of saying this is a primitive concept and that's doesn't make sense, because how would it be communicable? Maybe we're back to Wittgenstein's private language argument. I've always thought that begs the question. So look, there are big discussions here, but I would say, and I find talking to non-philosophers, this makes sense. Lance was challenging me on this. Is this what ordinary people think? I think it is. I don't have empirical data backing that up, but decades of conversations, like talking about lots of philosophical concepts, people say, what the hell are you on about? You talk about this way of thinking about consciousness that I think is correct. People get it straight away. Okay, all right, I better leave it there. Please subscribe to the channel, to the Substack. I'm going to do something every Thursday, and let's keep the discussion going. Let's build the community. Thanks for listening.